What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. One of the hardest things that we have to do today as CEOs is hire great performing teams. Now, today we're going to specifically talk about sales teams because, of course, that's what I always talk about, selling. And when you think about building a company and scaling the sales, when your sales are flat, when things aren't moving forward, you start to wonder what's wrong? What's happening? Why am I not getting the results that I need? And you look at the sales team. And sometimes we want to blame people. We want to blame the sales leaders. We want to blame the salespeople. But what we really have to do is look at, as a CEO, what have I done to properly support the sales growth that I need? We look at our leaders and we look at our sellers and say, can they be peak performers? What will it take? Well, in order to have peak performing salespeople, you have to have peak performing sales leaders. And in order to have both, you have to hire right. And then once you've hired, you have to continue to coach people and help them develop. So I am so excited to have my dear friend, my colleague, my confidant, some that I work with very frequently to help CEOs make sure they have peak performing teams. Lori Richardson, welcome to the show.
Alice, it is just such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I can't wait to jump into this conversation because you have so much to share. And the two of us have worked together so many times to really help companies build peak performing teams. So let me just pause for a second and have you introduce Score More Sales and tell everybody what you do.
Great. Thank you. So we're a sales strategy firm called Score More Sales. When I first launched it almost 20 years ago now, seems so crazy. But I started off as a kind of a reactive trainer. And so people would call and say, oh, we need to learn about this sales topic or that sales topic. And so we'd customize the content, we'd deliver it. People would tend to really appreciate it, rave about it sometimes. But then I'd go back to them and I'd say, well, how much did that help your team? What's the ROI? And I always got blank stares because, as we know in training, there's so little accountability and there's just so little, there are not ways to track it like there should be. So I went back and I looked for tools and processes that could help me quantify, the help that we were offering. And since we started doing that about 8 years ago, it was a real game changer because we need to be able to show results in sales, right?
100%. And I remember back in the days when I was selling and delivering for Miller Hyman, and I would get in a room with 25 salespeople for 2 whole days, right? And it was, I think, better than most training because it was live accounts that you were really working on. Salespeople had to prepare in advance and bring an opportunity that they were working on trying to close, right? So that it wasn't hypothetical. They were working on real deals that they cared about. And they'd be doing so well and they would think this is great and they would say how good it was and everything. And the course would end and I would call back a few weeks later, to see how did things go, what were they doing, were they using the tools that they learned. And it was sort of like, yeah, back to business as usual, And I'm like, oh my gosh, you just wasted $20,000. There's so much here. But the problem is, like you said, how do we track what they learned? How do we get them to engage and keep using what they learned? We need better ways, right?
Right. Yeah. And having coaching involved is a key part to follow up from training, to have someone, whether they're internal or external, but they're really committed to making sure that the reps absorbed what was talked about and that they're using it in real situations like you were saying you did in your training, but on an ongoing basis. Because once they do that, then they build up that muscle. But if they don't do it, there's a big disconnect, and you and I have seen it, many times where people just can't be bothered, or they're too busy, they can't focus, and it costs them literally millions of dollars because of this.
Yeah. So you have specifically found some things that make a huge difference. And one of them is some assessments by a company called the Objective Management Group. Now, you and I have worked together using this tool, right? These tools that Objective Management Group has, they fondly called OMG, uh, to actually help hire better sales leaders and better salespeople, right? And then to assess the existing crew to determine what kind of coaching needs to be done to help them develop. And in some cases, to determine that they're probably not the right person for the job and they're going to need a graceful exit. So, tell us a little bit about, first of all, how did you find these tools? Why did you choose them? And how are you currently using them?
Yeah, I did an exhaustive search for tools, and just strategies that I could work into creating a process, which is the process that we have now. I wouldn't say that it's tools that we sell, but we wrap everything into a process so that we can help companies figure out whether the salespeople have what's called the will to sell. Those are things like desire, commitment, outlook, responsibility, and motivation. Those are things that are very hard to tell in an interview, because as salespeople, we do our best sales job, Alice, when we interview, right?
So true. That's what I always say to sales leaders and to CEOs. Of course, they sold you on hiring them. They're good, right? That's what they
Yeah,
do.
yeah. And then, the tactical skills can always be taught. Those are the consultative selling and hunting and reaching decision makers. But there's another group of things that are kind of, I consider it under the hood. If you think of a car analogy, things about whether someone really needs approval or not. If I need approval, I'm trying to make friends all the time, and instead of
Trying to
thinking
get people to
about,
like me instead of worrying
yeah.
about helping them get what they need.
Yes, and so if I'm a manager, a sales manager, I'm gonna get pushback from my reps, and I'll accept it because, I really want them to like me. I'm kind of cool. I want to be a cool manager. If I'm a seller, I let the customers push back, and they say, "Oh, we'll get back to you. Don't call me, I'll call you." And we go, "Okay,"
I need to
because,
think
we don't
about
want.
it. We need to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and instead of, maybe challenging the assumption like, "Well, Alice, did I miss something? Because it seemed like you were really excited about moving forward, and what did I miss?" So there are a number of different things that these tools will look at, and then we wrap it in training and coaching and helping people onboard well. Because as you said, just bringing someone on who might be a star player isn't enough. They have to be onboarded and assimilated, and we need to repeat and reinforce all the things that will help them succeed. So it's not for everyone. I mean, this is change management, and a lot of people don't want to change deep down. And if you have a team of people, you have a buying team, you have a team within sales and HR. Sometimes there's one or two people that just want to buck the trend, do their own thing, and then the whole process does not work well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that I think is difficult for leaders out there today, and for the CEO, they want to let their leaders hire the people, right? And first of all, hiring is a skill you need to acquire. We don't come equipped, right?
Yeah,
As adults, like we didn't grow up taking courses on how to hire people. In
right.
fact, I very few people have ever taken a course on how to hire someone, right, Lori? I mean, I've never met one, right?
Yeah.
So here as a CEO, we want to let our leaders hire people, and eh, we expect them to be able to do a great job of it. But the fact of the matter is they haven't been trained to do it. We haven't been trained to do it. And as CEOs, sometimes, especially with sales leaders, when we're hiring leaders of leaders, or when our VP of sales or CRO is hiring sales leaders, we might want to have an interview with them as well, just to put in our own opinion. And that's all great. But again, we're asking a certain set of questions that may not actually be giving us the right information. So, what I love is the way that you can use the OMG candidate assessment
Mhm.
so that we're only interviewing people who can and will sell.
Right.
And then we can, as non-expert interviewers, we can then ask a set of questions about cultural fit and get to know the person and the personality, versus having to drill into how do you handle a complex sale, and how do you close a deal, and all of the sales skill stuff. And then we also miss the will to sell part, because we don't even know what questions to
Yeah.
ask to uncover that. So let's dive in there. So the candidate assessment, when we set that up, the CEO, the sales leaders talk together, and what kinds of information do you get from them to make sure you can set that candidate profile up so that it will catch the right people in that net and present them as candidates?
Well, as you know, selling is so different in so many different industries and sizes of companies, and so there is no one size fits all type of process to use. And I wanted to step back real quickly because you asked me why did I choose the
Oh,
tools
yeah.
that I chose, and the reason was because a lot of people think that you hire up based on personality, or psychological assessment of some type, but actually this is the only tool I've used. These are the only tools that are based on core sales competencies and core sales management competencies. Not some of the core sales competencies, but all of the top 21 sales competencies for success in selling. And sales managers need to understand selling too, because salespeople will respect them when that happens. If you've ever had a manager that had no background in sales, I don't know if you did, Alice, but I did. It's usually horrible. Now, there may be an exception to the rule, but generally we want people that understand selling, and most have sold because we usually get promoted into a sales manager role. But it's important to work with skills, because we can identify the strengths that people have and how coachable they are. If someone is not strong with their will to sell and they're not coachable, there is no point to hire them, and they will not be
Right.
recommended to move them forward in
Right.
the process.
And Lori, I see so many people using DISC assessments for
Yeah.
candidates. And I'm like, all that is going to tell you is what their personality type is. And you think, oh, I want a driver with some introversion. Maybe not. Right. For some positions, that might be okay. But we know when people have a really high eye on the disc, they tend to be talkers. Right. And they do tend to want people to like them.
Yeah.
And so that's not telling you whether they're going to be good at selling what you sell, whether they can sell and whether they will sell. It's just giving you an idea of what their personality is like. And I see a lot of people using DISC and actually choosing the wrong types on the disc. I think sometimes somebody with a higher C can be really great for some jobs because it's more technical, right? So I think that using those tests is only going to tell you what their personality type is, and maybe what they're a little better, at some types of interactions, but it's not going to tell you if they can and will sell.
Right.
So how do you set that up? So if I'm saying, okay, I want to hire an enterprise seller
Mhm.
for a complex sale, the deals are 100,000 to $1 million. Like, how would
Right.
you help me and my company make sure that it assesses whether I can and will sell in that situation?
So it's customized. So first we start with the company, and we're going to learn about the size of the company and how people work, and we're going to learn about management style and so forth, and then we're going to work on the specific roles. So for each of the sales roles, sometimes we have different roles for different regions. different areas, certainly whether it's enterprise or SMB. And so these are all customized to the people that you want to hire. And you can even tweak it once it's set up, because if you're, as we learn, it's a learning process. So we may have a few areas that we might want to alter a little bit that could allow more people to be recommended, because people will either be recommended, not recommended, or they'll be worthy of consideration. And only if they're recommended, we want you to move them forward. Sometimes people will move someone who's worthy of consideration forward in the process, and it can pan out. But we'll find over time the things that really trigger that. Like there's something called figure it out factor, for example, which is really about how quickly someone will ramp up. So there are all sorts of things that we set up in advance before you give out the links to candidates to apply. And then we ask you to give it to everybody, and as soon as possible in the process, because you want to eliminate the people that are not recommended are going to waste your team's time in evaluating, in going through and trying to move them forward. And people will have exhaustive conversations with a candidate that ultimately they're like, I don't think this person's even listening to what I'm saying, because they wouldn't have been recommended through our process.
So let's take a typical hiring process. And so we are putting out some messaging to get candidates, or we have a recruiting firm finding candidates for us. And what you're saying is, as very early in the process as possible, all candidates should take this assessment. And then the assessment is looking at whether they can and will sell based on the parameters set up about how big the company is, about what type of sale they make, the dollar amounts, the how hard the sale is, right? Yep. We're setting all that up. It's like a checklist. Yes, this is a pretty difficult sale. Yes, it's millions of dollars. Yes, this person has to close the deals. Yes, they have to get to the decision maker. So check.
How closely managed they are, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we get that all set up, and then we send the link out to the candidates. They take the assessment, and it comes back with a score that's telling us if this candidate is recommended, not recommended, or worthy of consideration. Now, I want to make a note here because I've used this so many times. What I want everybody out there listening to know is that they are recommended or not recommended for this specific job. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be a great seller in some other job. What you're trying to find is the people who will be a great seller for this specific job. And that's why it's so customized.
And it's saying that they're recommended to move forward. It's not saying they're recommended to hire them right now.
Right. Recommended to move forward, which is so important. So now I have these scores that tell me if they can and will sell in the situation that we have at our company for this seller. This exact role, right? So now I can say who's going to interview them first, right?
Yeah.
And they get this recommended, they get this assessment, they can read what this seller is good at and what they're not so good at. And what I love is that right in the assessment, it even says, ask these questions during the interview. So now me, the not professional interviewer, right? I can see some questions to ask that help me decide if we should move this candidate forward or not. So I really love that. And tell me about how you train people to actually do this. So they get to this point, and now I've got this paper in my hands that gives me these clues about the seller. And what do you then coach me to do next as the interviewer?
Well, we have a whole process that we go through. In fact, pre-COVID, we came and did a day or two with people on the whole hiring process. So we have done sales. You said you haven't seen hiring training. We've done some of that. But the main thing is just that there's a specific process. You don't deviate from it. Everybody goes through the same things. Everyone goes through it, even if they're a friend of the CEO or son of, somebody on the team, summer intern. They're really good. They're in the industry. So we thought we'd just hire them. I mean, we have to put everybody through the process. That's also the way you want to do it from an HR standpoint, because it's fair for everyone, so it follows the guidelines. And and so we're going to see who is recommended, and now you're saving maybe 10 or 20 hours a week because you're not having everybody have conversations with people that are not recommended. So think about that first. Like, here's a big savings. Now we can focus on the people that are much more interesting for these roles. And we have questions to ask them. So we're going to ask for, the next interviewer to use a process, and we would go forward and have them use these specific questions and get a sense of how they articulate. Do they sound like a good fit? Can they give us some examples from the past? And then we can move them forward to the next stage, which, narrow it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really like to do with the teams that I work with is have them write out their hiring process, right? So where are we sourcing the candidates from?
Yeah,
What messaging are we use to get them to want to apply,
absolutely.
right? Because we can attract them with the wrong message sometimes if we're not careful. Then explaining to them that we have this process. It starts with this candidate assessment, and then moving them in. And I like to explain early, hey, this is what our process is. We take time because we want you to get to know us to get to know you, and make sure it's a fit between both parties. So we're going to have you interview in these ways. We're going to do these assignments, and this is how we're going to progress through the process. So everybody's on the same page.
Yeah,
And then I really help the CEOs and their teams to have good discussions around candidates. So if you do this well, everybody has asked the same questions when they were interviewing, so they can look at candidates next to each other and see how they pan out. They can look at the candidate assessment and see the scores right next to each other to see, right? So now I've got, something a little more objective than just
yeah,
my gut feel. Do I like this person or not?
right.
Right.
Right, because
And
you're not going to be better than 50%, I bet. At least I never was, and I thought it was pretty good. But the other thing it does is it helps with female candidates, which we know in sales, women are underrepresented, and anyone who's underrepresented in sales, this having this set process is a really good way to support building an inclusive team as well.
yeah, absolutely, which is so important. And maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, because that is such an important topic that now that you bring it up, I want to spend a little time on that. But back to this, where we've got a little bit more of objective. It's still subjective to some degree, although the candidate assessment is not subjective. It is
Right.
absolutely objective, and you can see the comparison of scores between the people that you're interviewing. And then if you ask a similar set of questions to each candidate, you can then compare that. And then you get in a room with all the people who have done the interviewing. And some of these interviews, by the way, can be done with 2 or 3 people and the candidate, or they can be done one-on-one, different ways. And I know you recommend this too, Lori, is give them an assignment of something that they will have to do in their job and see how they do it, right? A
Mhm.
writing assignment. Can they write a LinkedIn post? Can they write a good email? Or maybe putting together a little bit of a market study on the territory they're going to be in, or something like that. Give them an assignment, right? Then all get in a room and discuss it. But here's the thing, when we start to go, oh, but I really liked him. Yeah, let's go back to the assessment.
Yeah,
This was not the strongest candidate on the assessment.
right.
And then we can say, but what's the culture fit of these? So if we organize them by how well they scored in the can and will sell department. And I think something you mentioned that's so important is, are they coachable, and do they have that figure it out ability, right?
Yeah.
Now we're actually doing a hiring process that's going to get us to peak performers faster.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you mentioned culture fit, because I did a call yesterday with Siobhan Thatcher and the Sales Enablement Society, and she uses the term culture add, which I really
Ah,
love, because culture fit is kind of like we want somebody just like us, right? To fit what we have. Like, can we put them on a rowboat? And, I've heard all these different stories, but a culture ad is somebody who can bring something, bring something really special. And I think that's an interesting change in terms.
I love that. I love looking at it that way. What do they add to our culture, right? That's going to
Yeah.
be important too. So let's actually dip into diversity now, because I
Okay.
think that is a good lead into it. But I want to say, preface it with this. If we use an assessment like the OMG candidate assessment, and have a great pool of candidates to pick from, now we can also start to do some of the other things that we never have time to do, right?
Yeah.
Like make sure it's a better culture fit or a culture ad, as our friend Siobhan says.
Yeah.
But we can also start to worry about diversity more. And I think I hear so many CEOs and sales leaders telling me, I want to hire a diverse candidate pool. I want
Yeah.
to have a diverse candidate pool. I want to hire women. I want to hire people of color. I want to hire people from different backgrounds with different thoughts. And yet, when they get these candidates, they all look the same, think the same.
Yeah.
And that makes me want to mention your new book called She Sells, because you give people tons of great ideas on how to find diverse candidates and how to hire diversity. So let's just dive into this a minute. For all of you out there who are really concerned about hiring diversity, there are some great ways to do it. And again, using these types of assessments lets you relax on the, oh my gosh, can they sell and will they sell?
Right.
And look at all the other factors and features of these
Yeah.
people that might be so great. So yeah, Lori, what do you want to say about that?
Well, you actually brought this up to me a few days ago, and I couldn't agree more, is that we're working in this world at work, and then if we're a majority person in society, we go home to our majority neighborhood and our majority friends, and we don't even know a lot of people who are African American or other cultures, or other age groups, for example.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we widen our net, that we widen our friendships, that and extend. We can meet people on LinkedIn. A lot of people turn into friends over time, so that we have a better sense of this diverse world that our buyers are in, and we want to match up with our buyers. We want our sellers to match up. So that means more women, just more diversity, and diversity of thought, because we know that means more revenue growth.
Right. And
So,
even thinking about diversity in, oh my gosh, every salesperson we hire comes from this industry, or the, yeah, we only hire people that come from Cisco, or something like
yeah, or
that. It's like,
prep
oh,
school. We used to, when I was in
cool. Yeah.
Boston, it was always a prep school guy who played lacrosse,
Right.
named whatever.
Yeah.
So
So we want to look a little further. And like you were saying, and I shared a video that Mika made with Gerhard, when Mika, I can't think of her last name right now, but she's a CRO for a huge Major League Baseball team,
yeah,
and she's an African American woman. So first of all, she's a woman in baseball, and we know that's getting a little more common, but it's not that common yet, right? And she's an African American woman in baseball, and she's saying, "Look, even me, I am an only, right? The only woman in this senior level, the only Black person in this senior level.
yeah,
And I want to hire a diverse candidate pool, but I go home to people who look like me, right? I dine with others that look like me. I go to a club with others that look like me. I even have to be conscious. How do I attract a diverse pool? Well, I have to change who I sit with at dinner and where I go and who I know if I want to attract that. And I think that so many people just don't think of that, right? So we
yeah,
put out, oh gosh, we're hiring salespeople to our own company. Well, that's going to get us more people like us, right? And
yeah,
then we put it out to our friends. Oh, I want to, we're hiring, right? Oh, Lori, we're hiring. Yeah,
yeah,
okay. So then you put it out to your friends who are just like you, right?
yeah,
Now, you and I have worked really hard on building a very diverse network of people who we know and love. So when
Yeah.
we put it out to our networks, we do get more diversity back. But
Yeah.
we work hard at belonging to groups of women sellers.
Yep.
We work hard at being at places where there are others that don't think and look and act exactly like us and don't come from the same backgrounds.
Yeah.
Other people aren't yet doing that. So let's share a few ideas on how they can get a diverse candidate pool, because what happens, as you and I both know, um, they put out an ad on Indeed or someplace where,
Yeah.
college graduates know to look, right? So again, you're just slimming down your pool again. Or they have a recruiter, and my gosh, I just want to strangle some of these recruiters. I'm like, you brought me 12 white men.
Yeah.
You got nobody else? I
Yeah.
mean, what pool are you fishing
Because
in,
that's
right?
easier. That's easy. That's the easy way. It's harder to do what we're talking about. It's harder to say, we're going to take a little more time to figure this out. But looking at, different places, now there are communities of women in a lot of different places that we know online, and women in revenue, and
Women in
women in
sales.
sales, and Society of Saleswomen, and Sisters in Sales. And, there's a lot of different places that people can go. I admire a leader who will post on LinkedIn to say, ultimately, we're going to find a great candidate. And we just want you to know that we're looking for anyone that has, we want to build an inclusive team. And so please apply, or please spread the word. It doesn't mean they're going to hire, because people say, well, we can't say that we only want to hire a woman, because you don't need to do that. But if you say, we have this open and we are looking, here's what is required. The other thing is that there are tips on how to make a job posting look more appealing to more people. For example, if you have hundreds of bullet points all the way down, you're going to have less women apply, because as women, we don't want to waste people's time. And we're going to think, you know what? I don't do all those things, so I'm not even going to apply.
Yeah, the requirements. Let's stay on that for a second, because sometimes I see companies put way too many requirements.
Yeah.
You don't need a salesperson to have all of those things to
Oh,
be a good salesperson.
right.
Take some of those off, because I think that uh, people who maybe have a different background, or again, women will just say, oh, I don't fit all of those
Yeah.
criteria, I shouldn't apply. So really be careful. Maybe there's 3 key criteria that you absolutely have to have, and the rest are sort of nice to have. So
Yeah.
don't bullet it to death of all the requirements. You won't get very many people. And I don't know why this is, Lori, and I know we've talked about this before, but for whatever reason, the guys will be like, I got 4 of the 8. I'm good,
They'd be lucky to have me.
And so they just go right in there with that.
Yeah.
But women and people who have been historically marginalized don't do that. They think, I'm not good enough, maybe, or they're just
Or,
not sure.
and I think, sometimes people say it's a confidence thing, but I think it's I don't want to waste your time thing. Like,
Yeah,
why would I even apply if I only met half the requirements?
right.
It's a waste of your time and my time. And
Yeah.
so, and we do that as women all the time. We make judgments. We decide to go somewhere or not go somewhere because, like, I don't really want to do this, that, or the other thing. And we'll eliminate ourselves from things that might have been really great. We know, putting on events and things like that, that sometimes people exclude themselves and then feel bad later. So I'm going to encourage women to apply, even if they don't meet all the criteria, and for leaders to just, even put in it, if you don't match all of the requirements, please reply anyway. Please
Yeah.
apply anyway.
Yeah. I love that. I think that is a really good way to get a more diverse candidate pool. And again, if you're worried these people won't be qualified, right?
Right.
Can they and will they sell? Don't worry about it.
Right.
You just worry about attracting the most diverse candidate pool that you can.
Yeah.
And then you give them this
Give them
OMG
the
candidate
process.
assessment,
Yeah.
and it takes care of it for you. It
Yeah.
will rise to the top those who can and will sell.
Yeah.
And I just can't drive that home enough to CEOs who are letting their leaders do it another way,
Right.
because you're not getting a diverse candidate pool and you're not getting the best salespeople, as noted in most sellers, whatever, 50% of sellers don't hit their quota. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is you didn't pick the right people in the first
Right.
place.
There are a lot of people that shouldn't be in sales that are in. And I would say, if you do this with Objective Management Group, work with a partner and work with someone who knows what they're doing. We'd be honored to talk to people about it, obviously. But we've learned so many things over time because it's not all intuitive. There's a lot to learn about this. And then what I work with companies on now is just being a stickler about the process and following the
Yeah.
process. You just cannot let things slip. If you work the process, you get great results. And that's
Well,
why we get leaders who will go to a new company and they immediately call us and say, I worked it into my comp plan that we're going to evaluate the team first. So I know what I'm walking into. We just did that with one of our repeat clients yesterday. It
well, and
was
I
very,
want to get to that in a second about about evaluating your existing team, but I just want to go back to, stick to your process, because you've been with me, Lori, through me breaking the process that I set up at my own clients, right? So I'm like, okay, here's the hiring process. We write it down. Everybody agrees to it. We're going to use the candidate assessment. We go through and I get somebody who's not recommended and everybody wants them. And I even interview them and say, yeah, I think they can, do
I
it. Well,
like
convince myself I really like them. And we hire them. And like 2 or 3 weeks later, they quit, or we're like, oh my gosh, we've made a huge mistake. We have to let this person go. The 2 times in the last 3 years that I've done that and called you crying, I'm like, oh my gosh. I can just say to everyone out there, CEOs, ensure that your sales leaders have a process and that they stick to it. And if you use this candidate assessment, believe it. When it tells you whether they can and will sell, believe it, because it is true. It's been validated. It will hold up
it's
in a court of law.
92% accurate. So it's not 100%. Things can slip through, but 92%, I mean, that's way more than my 50% that I ever was.
Right. Well, oh my gosh. And it truly is. You're interviewing people. It's 50-50 whether you're going to get a good one or not.
Yeah,
And
flip a
it's not
coin.
only that. They might have been really good at their last job. They might
Yeah.
have been a 300% a quota
Yes.
person at their last job. But do they fit the criteria for this job?
Yeah.
That's what we miss all the time. And that's what I love on the candidate assessment. There's 2 pieces, or actually 3, but it's, do they fit the criteria for this specific job where you have
Yeah.
this checklist of things they have to be able to do, closing deals and getting to the economic buyer and all those kinds of things, right? And then it's also got the, will they sell? Do they have the
Yeah.
desire? Do they have the drive? Do they have the commitment? Do they have the responsibility? Will they take responsibility? Are they coachable, right?
Yeah.
And that way you really can see and what you're walking into.
Yeah.
Because once they're hired, what do you do, Lori, with that assessment? It turns into a coaching document.
That's right. So that's a great benefit of it. It's not just a tool. That's why I don't like talking about them as tools, because they're really processes. And now we have some common language. Hopefully we've looked at the whole team with the other process, and now we can, help people grow by focusing on their strengths and helping them with the areas they're not as strong in. And it's amazing.
Yeah, that coaching document, once the leader learns how to use that,
Yeah.
they can choose one topic, one area of strength, one area of weakness, and just work on that. And I like working on the strengths as much as the weaknesses, because I want them to get even better at their strengths, right? But then
Yeah.
sometimes they're going to have to get better, for example, at closing or at getting to the economic buyer. So we're going to have to work with them on that. But then we can see exactly what their progress is. We know what to work with them on. We can see and measure the progress, which I just love. So
Yeah.
that takes me to wanting to have you share about how we look at existing teams, because this is so great for hiring to bring in better candidates to begin with, right? And then
Yeah,
to hire peak performers from the get go and to know how to coach them. But we're sitting here with an existing team, and this happens all the time to me, Lori. A CEO will call me in and they'll say, "Gosh, I don't know if this is the right sales leader. I don't know if we have the right salespeople on the team. Can you assess them and tell me about that?"
yeah,
And I usually say something to them, especially about sales leaders. I say, if you think they're not the right sales leader, you're probably right. But yes, I
yeah,
can talk to them, right? And I can see and I can learn. But with these assessments, for the sales leaders and the sales team that are existing. How does this work? How do we help a CEO feel confident that they have the right team and that that team can be developed, or know that, yeah, you don't, you're right. You were right. You don't
yeah.
have the right leader. And some of these team members are not going to be able to sell well in this particular situation that you have.
Yeah, it's another process where we look at all the sellers, we look at the sales managers, and this can work with multiple teams with a larger company. And we look at the top leader, and it all interconnects. So one area that we're always talking about coaching, right? So in this case, we're going to ask about 7 or 8 different types of coaching to find out what does your manager coach you on. And a rep can list a number of different areas that they get coached on, and how often do they coach you, because we'll go to the manager too and say, do you coach your reps? Oh yeah, yeah, of course I do. How often do you coach them? Oh well, all the time, and they'll put down how much time they feel that they coach. And then we get the individual reps back sharing what they really are, how much they really feel they're coached and what they're coached on. And we can see big gaps. And right there, it's hugely valuable to help to reset and to set expectations about what coaching should be, which in my mind, as much as 50% of a manager's time.
Oh,
I know that
yeah.
doesn't happen, but that's ideally what the stats show, that to really see change over time. And then we'll also see if the reps are in the right roles, because you might have 3 or 4 different selling roles, and it will show which reps are in the right roles and why, and give you incredible data like that. So we'll end up with hundreds of data points, and then we help the client interpret that data. So it's, data is one thing. I mean, having a massive data isn't very helpful until you
No.
can hone in on the 3 key areas is kind of what we target. And then sometimes people want more, but we've done some really incredible projects that way, by helping companies figure out, is it a hiring issue? Is it a manager issue? Is it a combination of things? And it's very, very rewarding.
Yeah, that data really informs you on what you need to do next, right? So I think a key thing too is that when you assess people and you find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, again, around selling in your environment. They might
Yeah,
be a great seller somewhere else, they're just not a great seller in this environment.
right.
But also, it gives us a clue as to, just because they're not a good seller in this particular job doesn't mean they won't be a good person to have at your company in another job. So
Right.
it can clue us into that as well, and not just be like, oh, they're not performing, fire them. So
Right.
that's a huge waste of money, because this person has been trained. They know your product, they know your people, they know your
Yeah.
culture. If they're a good human and they're doing the best they can, it's just that this position isn't exactly right for them. Why would you fire them, right?
And
Holy
they'll
cow.
know it. They when they know that, it's funny how that we've seen managers who, someone told me once, they said, "Oh, he's not going to like hearing that he didn't do very well on this as a manager." And I talked to the manager, and he was so relieved. He goes, "I really hate managing. I really want to be an individual contributor again." But he just couldn't find a way to do it, that worked. And he moved over, and he's, racking up the revenues for the company, doing what he loves. And they brought in a manager who was much stronger. So it's a happy ending in those
Yeah,
cases.
yeah, absolutely. And again, what I love is that once we understand the leader and the strengths of the leader and the weaknesses of the leader, their leader can coach them. That could be the CEO, it could be the CRO or somebody above them that's then coaching them, or you can hire a coach, right, to coach them to improve. But we've got a document that tells us with data points what this person is good at and what they need help with, right? So now we have a path, a clear path. These are the things that we need to do, and it makes the coaching so much easier. And in turn, that sales leader has that same type of information on each seller, and they can then work, a clear coaching path. Okay, they've got to become better at closing. Here are the things they need to know. I'm going to coach them on that. They've got to be better at asking questions. I can coach them on that. So it's so clear from the assessment what needs to be done next, that if you set them on that path, right, and have that expectation as a CEO, now you have all this data. Let's do something with it. Let's use it, and let's develop these people to be peak performers. Or maybe they're already very good. We're going to make them even better, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it works out that people either want to get better or they realize they're really in the wrong role and they know that you know it now. And so they're going to look for other avenues, like maybe in customer success, or maybe as an account manager. Maybe they could farm because they're stronger in farming than hunting. And so it's a really, I just find it to be a very positive experience when you can have honest conversations with people about, these are about skills. Many sales managers were not taught how to be a sales manager. I never was. And so of course you're not going to know how to do everything. It's not a personal attack. It's just, we're just
Right.
weighing different, how the skills fit for you. And then you can improve if you want to in many areas. And if not, if you have a low, what we call sales DNA, and you're not coachable, then we're going to know that, something else is ahead for you.
That's right.
But
Off
you'll
to your
want to
next
do it.
adventure. Right.
Yeah.
It may be something else at this company or somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, my gosh, Lori, the time has flown by, and I knew it would. And I'm so glad we got to share with the CEOs and those who support CEOs out there, that there is a better way to hire, that there is a great way to assess the team you currently have, and to really build that sales organization that's going to take you to the next level where you want to be. Increase the valuation of your company, right? Because in the end, most of the CEO founders that we work with, they want to exit at some point. And so increasing sales, right, is just one piece of it. You've got to increase that valuation too. And having a strong team is going to do that. So Lori, tell everyone where they can find you if they want to learn more.
Well, they can reach out to me by email, Lori, Lori, at scoremoresales.com. I'm on LinkedIn, kind of all over the place. We're on a lot of social media at Score More Sales. And, you can get my phone number right off of my LinkedIn profile. So
And I really thank you, Lori. And I really recommend, if you're trying to hire a more diverse candidate pool, and if your company truly wishes to get women onto the sales team and promote them into sales management, then please get Lori's book. It's called She Sells, and you can get it on Amazon. You got, oh, there it is. Good job. I should have had it ready. All right. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori. As always, right? I mean, we talk every week, but it's always a pleasure. I always learn something, and I thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Alice.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.